Decades after the events of The Shining, and now adult Danny Torrance struggles with alcoholism the same way his father did, while also dealing with another sinister threat. Let's read Doctor Sleep to see how that goes. Welcome back to BG's Books. I'm Mr. BG, and today we will be reviewing Doctor Sleep by Stephen King. So, Doctor Sleep is the sequel to The Shining, a book that was released all the way back in 1977, and picks up 30-something years after the events of The Shining, and it follows a now adult Danny Torrance as he and a young girl named Abra, who also has the shine, as he battles alcoholism and another sinister threat of quasi-immortal vampire things. So that sounds very convoluted and very weird, but I promise this book is really insane and I just really like it. So I guess I should actually explain what it's about. So in the beginning of Doctor Sleep, we catch up with Danny and Wendy Torrance, who, of course, in the aftermath of Jack's passing, have gotten some basically life insurance checks, and they're now living in Florida, where Dick Halloran can keep an eye on them. And Danny has unfortunately had a lot of nightmares since the Overlook events, because how could you not? And specifically, he is haunted by the ghost of Horace Derwent, one of the previous caretakers, and Mrs. Massey, also known as the Woman in 217 or the Bathtub Woman. And so he's really scared about that. So Wendy calls over Dick, and then Dick basically instructs Danny on how to make lockboxes in his mind, which Danny uses to lock up both Horace Derwent and Mrs. Massey. So that's just out of his life now. And so in the next chapter, or I guess prologue, there's 3 prologues to this. In the second prologue, we meet a character named Andrea Steiner. And so she's had a rough life. Her father kind of did some stuff to her when she was younger. So she killed him, and then has just been hating men ever since. And this evil character named Rose the Hat, who is the main villain of this book, and Rose the Hat is the main leader of this group called the True Knot. And the True Knot is basically a group of quasi-immortal vampire things. We don't really know specifically what they are. I'm just going to say vampire things because that's what they're described as, vampiric-like things. But anyway, they're just a group of creatures that feed off of children's shine, which, when in pain, comes out as steam. And they inhale that steam, and they become young and immortal and stuff. So anyway, Rose the Hat sees, Andrea Steiner. She kind of marks a man for making an advance on her. And so she's she would be a perfect candidate for the True Knot. So anyway, long story short, Andy becomes Snakebite Andy, part of the True Knot. And there's a lot of members of the True Knot, so I'm not going to say every single one of their names, but the most important ones that we have are Rose the Hat, Crow Daddy, Barry the Chink, Snakebite Andy, and Silent Sari. So there's those main 5 right there. And so basically this happened back in the 80s, right? So then yeah, the True Knot just keeps going on. And then we finally meet adult Danny in either the very late 90s or the very early 2000s, where he wakes up in bed with a woman who he hooked up with the night before, and they use some money to buy some drugs, and that isn't very cool. So basically Danny, what he does is he's getting ready and stuff, he's about to leave, and then he sees that the woman who he woke up next to has some money in her wallet. And so he decides to steal her money, which is a decision that haunts him for the rest of the book. And so, stuff goes on. But now this is where stuff really gets interesting. So we meet this family called the Stone family, and they just recently had a child named Abra. And she has a level of the shine even more powerful than Danny Torrance could ever think of. Because when she's only a few months old, the 9/11 attacks happen, and written on her chest in blood or something are the numbers of the planes that crashed into the towers. So she like predicted 9/11 or something. And then when she was like 3 or 4, she was having a birthday party where she made spoons attach themselves to the ceiling with her mind. So her parents are like, what in the world is going on? So anyway, meanwhile, Danny, he is very much an alcoholic, just like his father was. So he's very much in his father's legacy of anger and alcoholism. But the thing about Danny and Jack is that Danny, he wants to put his life back in order. Like he finds a job in this place called Fraser, New Hampshire. So he gets a job there at first. He like works in the municipal part of town, just like driving a train and such. But he later moves to hospice, which we will get into. But he also attends AA meetings at the same time. AA is Alcoholics Anonymous. And so for the next 10 years, things are going good. He's like a really good orderly at the hospice. And because he has a shine back, because the alcoholism kind of, tainted his shine a little bit, he can now use his shine again, and he uses it to comfort dying patients as they die, which is like very nice and stuff. So like if you're having a miserable time dying, Danny will come in, he'll give you some of his shine, and then things will be better. So he's getting really good at that for the next 10 years. Yeah, and so stuff doesn't really happen for the next 10 years, but this is where stuff really gets interesting. So one day in 2013, this baseball player named Bradley Trevor is walking home from practice or whatever when he gets picked up by Barry the Chink, also known as one of the members of the True Knot. And due to some mind stuff, he thinks that he can trust them and whatever. He really can't. But anyway, long story short, he gets tortured really badly. They eat his steam, so they get like some more years onto their life. And he dies and is buried. But since Barry the Chink was wearing his baseball glove, they bury him with the baseball glove, and that will be important later. Anyway, so Abra, who is now like 12 years old, it says 13, but if you do the math, it's 12. But anyway, so she's like a preteen or a teenager now, and she like watched that boy die, like she feels it or whatever. And she has a connection through Dan, through Tony, which, if you remember back from The Shining, was Danny's imaginary friend that was actually future him. They kind of form a psychic bond through that. So Abra can just like send Dan psychic messages onto his blackboard that he has in his apartment. And so they communicate like that for years. And so one day they finally agree to meet in person. And because an adult meeting a child is very weird, they go under the guise that Dan is Abra's uncle, which is very important, and we will get back to that very soon. And so basically, Abra explains everything. She's like, they killed a baseball boy. I just don't know where. But actually, she does know where. She wrote some stuff down in a journal and stuff. And so Dan looks at it. He's like, okay. So what Dan does is that he gets Abra's pediatrician involved, Dr. John. And so yeah, they go to investigate and stuff. And then afterwards, they just got to tell Abra's dad about this. Her mom kind of left to go see her Abra's great-grandmother in the hospital who's dying of cancer, which we will also get back to. But so anyway, Dr. John and Dan help Abra convince Abra's dad of all this stuff. He's like, this is super weird, but okay. So basically what ends up happening is that Abra can astral project herself into other people's brains so that she can see what they're seeing. And basically they form an attack on several members of the True Knot. So Jimmy Numbers is one. Barry the Chink and Grandpa Flick already died because measles. Bradley Trevor had measles. So first it was Grandpa Flick and then it was Barry the Chink. But so Snakebite Andy, Jimmy Numbers, and the third one I forgot for some reason. They get killed, And Snakebite Andy is actually the last to get killed. But first, she reveals that Crow Daddy has actually been in Anniston, New Hampshire, which is where Abra lives, and he kidnaps her. Yeah, he drugs her, takes her in a stolen truck, and then just bails. So anyway, how they get out of this one is that Dave, who's Abra's father, is like really freaking out and stuff. And so Danny and Abra do this thing called swapsies, which is from the book, where basically they kind of switch bodies. So Abra's mind is now in Danny's body, and Danny's mind is in Abra's body. And Danny uses Abra's shine to telepathically or telekinetically push the gun that Crow's holding back into his face. But Crow's like, no, so he pushes it back in Abra's face, and then there's like a bit of a thing going on. But anyway, long story short, Dan, using Abra's body, wins the fight, and Crow gets shot in the face and dies. And when True Knot members die, they do this thing called cycling, which is where basically their like skin disappears and like their muscles disappear and stuff, and they cycle like that for a little bit until basically they're just no more. So that's basically what happens. So after all this happens, Abra finally gets to see her family again, but they go to the hospital where Abra's great-grandmother is. Her name is Conchetta, and because, Dan has the Shining and he helps people through death and stuff, he talks to Conchetta, where Conchetta reveals a secret that Dan very quickly reveals to Lucy, who is Abra's mother. And so that secret is that him and Lucy are half-siblings from their father's side, which is Jack Torrance. And that might cause a lot of confusion for Stephen King fans such as myself. That was certainly a shock that I got while reading it both times, actually. This is a reread, by the way. I guess I should have mentioned that, but there you go. Anyway, basically the explanation for that is that back before Jack Torrance got fired from his teaching job when he punched George Hatfield in the face, he was known to be a very wild boy, or like a very wild person. He was a party boy when he worked at school. And one day he had an affair with a student of his, and that student ended up being Lucy's mother. So Lucy is his half-sister, and she gave birth to Abra. So that whole thing that they made up about Dan being Abra's uncle, that's actually not that far from the truth. It's actually very true. So anyway, and then Lucy is very confused about it, as everyone else would be. And yeah, so basically the rest of the book goes on, and quickly everyone realizes Rose the Hat isn't going to stop until Abra's dead and gets her steam, because since the measles is kind of killing off everyone, Abra's steam is like pure and stuff, so it could like heal the measles or whatever. That's what they're thinking. It could cure the measles. And so the True Knot has had like this whole like campsite thing where the Overlook Hotel used to stand in Sidewinder, Colorado. And there's this place called the Roof at the Top of the World or whatever. Something like that. And it's on the exact spot where the Overlook Hotel used to do. So basically, Dan and his friend Billy, the one who got him the job, go over there. And Abra stays at home, but she astral projects herself into Dan again so she can kind of see what's going on. And basically, they're trying to like trick Rose the Hat. And so Silent Sari, what her thing is that she's going to like hide it out in a shed. And then when Rose says a certain phrase, she will sneak attack him with like a sickle to the back of the throat and stuff. But so Dan has undone the locks of one of his lock boxes, and so the ghost of Horace Derwent takes care of Silent Sari very quickly. So there's that. So anyway, now it's the final fight between Dan, Astral Abra, and Rose the Hat. And basically what they do is because the True Knot can like die like humans, because they can still like bleed and stuff. What happens is that there's a little bit of a psychic struggle, and then Abra kills Rose the Hat by pushing her off of the ledge of the top of the world, and Rose the Hat breaks her neck and dies. And so now they've got to destroy the hat, so Dan like gets some lighter fluid, douses the hat, sets it on fire, and that's it. The hat's done. But before he and Billy leave the place, he looks up to the mountain and sees Ghost Jack Torrance giving him a wave, saying, "Good job, son." And so that's like really peaceful and stuff. It's really nice. So in the epilogue, 2 years have passed since then. Abra is now 15, really 14, but 15. Danny has celebrated 15 years of sobriety because he was really intent on not drinking anymore. So that's very good for him. But Abra, being a teenager now, she's like getting into a little trouble. So Danny decides to tell her some of his family's history and stuff, and warns her that she shouldn't end up like Jack Torrance did, basically. And so Abra's like, okay, I promise. And so in the final pages of the book, Dan, as Dr. Sleep, that's why he's called Dr. Sleep, by the way, because he eases patients into death. One of his work acquaintances that he didn't really get along with is dying in the hospital and is asked to see them. So he visits the friend of the hospital and assures him that he will not leave until he sleeps. So yeah, that is basically the rundown of Dr. Sleep. I know I missed like some information in there. I remembered all I could and I put in there all I could, but I mean, obviously, since this is a long book, there's just a lot of stuff that I just could not mention. But I think I got the most of the stuff down. But anyway, so yeah, Dr. Sleep obviously continues some of the major themes from The Shining, like past trauma that is very evident there, of alcoholism that isn't like as big a deal as it was in The Shining, but it certainly is throughout the book, because Dan is constantly haunted about the alcoholism and even stealing the woman's money throughout the book, and only until the end can he get over it. Like, he can't fully get over it until the end. So yeah, this is a very like good book. It's one of Stephen King's best new ones, because a lot of people consider old Stephen King 74 through 1999, and then new Stephen King is 2000 to present. And so Dr. Sleep is definitely one of the better novels that Stephen King has written as of late. I'd actually say it is his best recent novel. But yeah, so first of all, I just love that it's a sequel to The Shining. Stephen King actually said that while on a book tour for Bag of Bones back in 1998, someone asked him whatever happened to the boy from The Shining. And so Stephen King started thinking, he was like, yeah, what did happen to Danny Torrance? And so Dr. Sleep got published, and there we are. But yeah, so I just love how this book cycles back to The Shining. It doesn't like use The Shining to like carry the entire story. It's a good story on its own. But I do love the themes of like mistakes of the past and past trauma and alcoholism and stuff that The Shining talked about and was really about. Dr. Sleep maybe doesn't go into like everything as strongly in those aspects as The Shining did, but it still is very much present throughout the book and is very apparent, because Dan, in a way, ends up just like his dad. He ends up as an alcoholic, an unemployed loser, and stuff. But unlike his father, he's able to get help for his problems, and he gets his life back on track. And he has the redemption arc that his father never did. And yeah, so I mean, Dr. Sleep is just a really fun book. If you enjoyed it as much as I do, it should just be a breeze to get through, because it is just such a page turner and stuff. It's very much like The Shining in a way. I can't say that it's better than The Shining, because there are very few Stephen King books that are better than The Shining, but it is certainly a sequel that lives up to the hype of The Shining, and it's just really good. So for any one of you who hasn't read Dr. Sleep, go read it. It is a fantastic sequel to The Shining, which is a fantastic book in itself. And yeah, that's about all I want to say, I think. But yeah, I highly recommend Dr. Sleep. Go read it. It's fantastic. But yeah, guys, that is the end of the video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. We're getting really close to 200 subscribers. So if you want to see me reach 200 subscribers, please subscribe down below and like the video if you haven't. But yeah, I've been BG from BG's Books, and remember,
Sleep then, sleep.
Guys, I'm actually really tired, so I'm gonna go to bed. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. See you later.